Ed Valentine, a Big Blue View, joins me on the LockedOn Giants podcast as we discuss the current state of the Giants. That's coming your way next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm Patricia Traina. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day, or if watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. And ladies and gentlemen, we're starting a new week, and I am joined by Ed Valentine, a Big Blue View. We're going to talk a little bit about the Giants' preseason opener against the New England Patriots, a winning effort for head coach Brian Daboll. But we're not going to focus too much on it. Instead, we're going to take some of what we saw from that and spin ahead to the coming week as far as things that, the Giants need to continue doing, the things that they need to work on. So, Ed, let me welcome you into the program first off.
Thanks as always for having me on, Patty. And I have to say, I was listening to your intro and I was like, did I stumble into some late night jazz station with that smooth listening voice going there? I was like, what did I stumble into here?
That's just me hopefully getting better at doing this. I mean, gosh, how many years have I been podcasting now? 6, 7?
We've been doing this a long time,
while,
Patty.
Yeah. So eventually, I've been trying to be a little bit better with the voice, because I know some critics say that my voice is like nails on a chalkboard, but to them I say, it's the only voice I have. It's the only voice I have. I'm not going to change it. It's the only voice I have. But anyway, let's get into this, Ed. So I don't want to dive too deep into the previous game, but, let's talk about some of the things that the Giants can build on from that first game. Now, we saw a lot of vanilla play by the offense and the defense. It was an evaluation mode for the coaching staff. They went in, not so much concerned about, stats and all that stuff, but evaluating the players. Daniel Jones, for example, but what decisions is he making? Is he being smart? Is he putting the ball in the right spot and whatnot? Same with Tyrod Taylor. You look at let's start with the quarterbacks there. What did they show you? What didn't they show you? Where are you still concerned about that group?
Well, I'll talk mostly about Daniel Jones and Tyrod Taylor. I thought that when you talk about Jones, I think the best thing for me, the very first thing I wrote down in my notebook Thursday night was that Jones was decisive. I mean, did we see perfection? No, but he was decisive. I thought there were a few examples where there was a third down pass to Saquon Barkley, which I think was a choice route for Barkley, where they both read the play the same way. They both read it correctly and got a nice completion. I was just impressed by Jones being decisive, getting the ball out of his hands. That's something we've talked about for the last couple of years, is him sometimes being a little bit hesitant. And it's also something that I think we've seen throughout training camp at times as he learns this offense, that he's been a little bit unsure at times where the ball should go, maybe where his receivers were going to be. And I thought Thursday night, I thought that was progress. And as for Tyrod Taylor, all I can say is, isn't it nice to have a competent professional backup quarterback on the roster?
Yeah. Something that this team didn't have last year. They tried, but when you cut corners, Tyrod Taylor did look good, decision making and everything like that. But the thing with Daniel, you mentioned decisiveness, and one of the things he did that I don't think is getting a lot of discussion. I know I wrote about it over on Giants Country. Daniel, when he took off with the ball in his hands as a runner, actually was smart about it in that he knew when to give up, whereas maybe the competitor in him would try and push forward for more yards and put himself at risk. he actually, he took some hits, obviously, throughout his dozen or so snaps, but on that play in particular, as soon as he took off, I'm sitting there going, oh my God, not again. And I'm like, bracing myself that something's going to happen. And he gave himself up and kind of moved his head and neck out of the way, on the play to where he didn't get, hit in that area. So I thought that was something that, kind of stood out at me with how Daniel Jones performed. And you mentioned the decisions and stuff. And, some of he went 6 of 10, probably should have been 8 of 10, I think, if the receivers had done a little better job catching the ball, but just not a bad outing by Daniel Jones.
No, it was fine. And as you said, on that one running play, he made a snap decision, and the thing opened up in front of him. He took off, which is probably exactly what he should have done. And he got down.
Mm-hmm.
He got down. He got out of harm's way once he had gotten the first down. And that's exactly what you want him to do.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's talk about the offensive line. The first team offensive line, they have some injuries now. So kind of back to the drawing board a little bit for that group. But I thought overall the unit played solid. I mean, the run blocking was decent. The pass pro was okay. I know there were a couple of hits that Jones took. I don't remember exactly how many, but I know one came through the tight end, if I'm not mistaken. But certainly a positive performance from the offensive line, which right now, we don't know what's going to happen with Shane Lemieux, the starting left guard, who had the toe injury, Jameel Douglas, the backup center, with the ankle injury. I mean, so are you concerned about that offensive line going forward?
Well, Patty, I think that you have to be concerned until we see it, in regular season games. I think there's a lot of good signs. I mean, Andrew Thomas is a good player. I think Evan Neal is going to be just fine. I think Evan Neal got beaten on that one sack that Jones took in, I think it was the second series on Thursday night. But I think Evan Neal is going to be just fine. I mean, are there going to be growing pains? Absolutely, there are going to be growing pains. He's going to see a lot of things for the first time, and he's going to line up across from guys, from all pro caliber pass rushers that have a lot more experience than he does, and there are going to be growing pains as he figures out how to handle those guys. But I'm not really concerned about the tackles at all. Obviously, on the inside, the Lemieux injury is a concern. I thought Joshua Uzudu played really well on Thursday night. I think he's going to be a good player for the Giants. I thought Ben Bredesen stepped up and made a solid case for himself, playing some center on Thursday. But yeah, I'm obviously concerned about the depth. I would be, the way things have gone with the injury to Lemieux, now an injury to Douglas, losing Matt Gano. Matt Pert is still on IR and probably not going to be available for the first half of the season, would be my guess. I think he's on the PUP list right now. But I know, Marcus McKethan, injured as well.
Nick Gates
still out. I would be shocked, Patty, if when roster cut downs come to 53, Joe Shane was on TV the other night talking about, there's going to be 1,300 players available who aren't available to us right now. I would be shocked if the Giants don't supplement that offensive line depth with someone that gets cut, especially, someone who can probably play the swing tackle position. No offense to Will Holden. We haven't seen enough for us to judge whether Will Holden can handle that job or not. But my guess is the Giants probably think they can do better than that when cuts come here in a couple of weeks.
All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up on today's LockedOn Giants podcast. But first, it's almost the start of the NFL season. And if you're into sports betting or fantasy, you need a competitive edge to win. That's why I highly recommend the Elias Game Plan app. It's the ultimate sports betting and fantasy companion for NFL, NBA, and MLB. Powered by the Elias Sports Bureau, the official statisticians of U.S. pro sports leagues, including the NFL, Elias Game Plan lets you access teams and player stats, head-to-head comparisons, and Elias's insights from the Elias Sports Bureau's research team. And if you're into fantasy football, this app is perfect for helping you to plan and manage your fantasy team all season long. Take my advice today. Download the Elias Game Plan app and take your game to the next level. Find Elias Game Plan app in the App Store or Play Store today. And let's stick with the offense before we move over to the defense and the position groups. Tight end, Daniel Bellinger, clearly tight end number one. Behind him, still some uncertainty. The running back, the backup running back position, I thought Antonio Williams was the best out of the three. Between Brightwell, Williams, and Corbin, and out of the four, I forgot, got to mention Platzkummer too. Receiver, there were a lot of guys missing. Tony didn't play. Sterling Shepard didn't play. I thought the receiver group, some guys stepped up. But let's talk about these skill position groups. Where are you most concerned right now with regards to how the depth is shaping up or not shaping up?
Well, if you want to talk about those three groups, Patty, I thought that all three running backs, Brightwell, Williams, and Sean Corbin, all played well. They all showed, some ability, and that's an interesting competition going forward. We've talked a lot about Richie James, about CJ Board, about Colin Johnson. Johnson had a terrific night in the preseason game. He's really making case for sticking around on this roster. I think the position where you have to be concerned about depth is tight end. I think Daniel Bellinger is obviously your tight end one. I think Jeremiah Hall is making this team. I think that I don't even know if you consider Jeremiah Hall a tight end anymore. When he's on the field, he seems to be playing fullback. When I talked to Hall a few days ago, he said, I wanted to be a tight end. I'm in the tight end room. I consider myself a tight end, but all of his snaps are coming at fullback. So, Ricky Seals-Jones, we haven't seen since the first day or two of training camp. And you mentioned the cut downs to 85 coming up on Tuesday. And I wonder if Ricky Seals-Jones should have a bag packed on Tuesday, but I don't know. I mean, you're talking about Chris Myrick, you're talking about Jordan Akins, and you're talking, Austin Allen, another undrafted rookie. So it's not that impressive when you look at the resumes. It's another position where I think the Giants might look at the waiver wire.
That's assuming, of course, that the tight end becomes a big part of the offense. I mean, Bellinger might be, for all we know, all they need.
Right, but you still have to. But you still have to have some depth. And I wonder, beyond Bellinger, I'm still not 100% clear what they're looking for at that position in terms of skill set. Are they looking for inline? Are they happy with a guy like Myrick who can just handle some of the inline duties and be an outlet as a receiver on occasion? Are they happy with having Jeremiah Hall to just handle some fullback duties when they need one on occasion? So we'll see. But again, it wouldn't surprise me if that's a position they look to supplement.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's the one position where I'm a little muddied as far, because receiver, you see Richie James stepping up, you see Colin Johnson stepping up, CJ Board. So you see those guys stepping up. While these other guys are sidelined or struggling or whatnot. So encouragement there. The running back position, like we said, that's RB3 we're talking about. So not as big of a deal, but tight end probably still the biggest question mark on the offensive side of the ball. So Ed, let's talk now about the defensive side of the ball. The Giants cornerback situation. I think we've got to start there. We have been watching the cornerbacks. Aaron Robinson has had a good camp. very physical player, has made plays, didn't really have the best of games in the preseason opener. And nerves, do you think, or just something else?
I don't know, Patty. He had an up and down game. I mean, he's still an inexperienced player, and he got picked on a little bit. He had a couple of penalties and didn't play well. But I'm not going to freak out about one preseason game with Aaron Robinson. You know, his first game out there. I'm going to look at it and say, okay, does he get better in preseason game 2? Does he get better in preseason game 3? Does he learn from this? Does he not commit any more silly taunting penalties, whether you think that should have been one or not? I'm just going to look at it as a baseline and say, okay, he's been better in training camp than that. You know, can he start to take what we've seen in training camp to the field? But my goodness, Patty, you know, Wink Martindale said it the other day that he's comfortable with Robinson, with Adoree Jackson, with Darnay Holmes, but he's not sure about the rest of the guys behind them. And my goodness, maybe Darren Evans made one or two nice plays, but there is nobody beyond those three at this point. And Cordale Flott suffered an injury. We don't know we don't know what the extent of that is at this point. There is nothing there that you can feel good about, beyond the starting guys at this point. There's just nothing that you can really say, oh, he really deserves to make this team, and I'll trust him if we have to get him out there on the field.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. They're going to have to.
So that's a problem.
Yeah, that is a big problem. And it's interesting. I think a question that needs to be asked of Daboll is, at what point did you establish a baseline with these guys? Was it day one? Did you, a certain point in training camp? Maybe it's different for every guy, but at some point they would have had to establish a baseline and say, okay, is this guy's stock going up or is it dropping? And, you talk about the cornerbacks. I mean, I saw way too many guys where receivers were running right past them and, passes were being thrown in their direction and they weren't even turning around and looking for the ball. They were giving chase to the receiver. And I'm like, gosh, how did they not have more pass interference calls than what they, what they had? And I think the answer was because they were getting beat down the field. So that is definitely a concern. All right. I want to talk about the linebackers, the inside linebackers, because Wink Martindale did say that was a competition, another, tight competition. Darian Beavers has looked tremendous. I mean, for a 6th-round pick, whom I think a lot of people weren't expecting a whole lot of, he's basically, I would think it's fair to say, and I don't know if you agree or not, that maybe he's past Tate Crowder as the potential second inside linebacker in the base. I mean, would you agree with that? Would you say that Beavers at this point is maybe leading the pack after Blake Martinez? Or how would you assess his game?
I think that Giants fans would like to see that, Patty. I think that what's interesting is that you can look at the two inside linebacker positions and see them as the same, but I know that Wink Martindale doesn't really see them that way. He looks at them as the Mike and the Will. And the way it's been aligned right now is that Tate Crowder and Micah McFadden have been working at that Will position. And McFadden didn't play bad in the preseason game the other night. He just has not made the splash plays and stood out in the ways that Beavers has. Beavers has been the second Mike behind Martinez, got the start Thursday. And the thing that's impressive to me about Beavers has been his instincts, has been his reading of plays. There were 2 plays in the game of Thursday where he read a screen pass and reacted to it beautifully. And he read another pass out to the flat beautifully and was there, to make a hit, even though the receiver had dropped the ball. But that's been the impressive thing to me about Beavers is just his instinctiveness and his ability to find the football. What I'm interested to see as we turn the page to a new week and as we get to practice is when we get to that base defense, do we start to see Darian Beavers slide over and take some of Tay Crowder's snaps when they line up with two linebackers. We really haven't seen that. We've seen Beavers in place of Martinez. We haven't necessarily seen Beavers in place of Crowder. And that will be something to watch, is whether we start to see that, because he's earned a look.
He definitely has. And I think you could probably say, given that Martinez isn't signed beyond this year, Beavers is probably the heir apparent to that particular spot.
Yeah, at this point, you would have to say he's certainly making a case for that. Obviously, we haven't seen any regular season games yet, but certainly he's intriguing. Certainly, he's shown more thus far than you might have expected from a 6th-round pick.
All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up on today's LockedOn Giants podcast. But first, BetOnline.net is the only place that offers the best information on the latest odds, contests, and player props for all your sports betting needs. No matter what sport you're into, BetOnline.net has you covered. Plus, they offer everything you need to know for live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head on over to BetOnline.net today to learn more about the trends and the action. BetOnline, where the games start. All right, another area, Ed, that didn't really perform well, and I'm kind of thinking maybe, I don't know, do you give this group a pass because of the circumstances? The special teams coverage was not very good. They gave up a couple of long kickoff returns, a couple of punt returns that were sizable. It's a challenging thing for Thomas McGahee because, he's got guys that he's rotating in and out, some of whom will probably not be on the roster or any NFL roster in the fall. But still, you looked at that and that to me was, kind of disappointing because special teams, it is 1/3 of the game. I think a lot of us forget that, but are you concerned right now with special teams, or is it just, let's let the roster settle in and then we'll worry about whether or not this continues?
I think I'm on the let's let the roster settle in side of that debate, Patty. I didn't like the coverage that I saw Thursday night either. I mean, there was a long punt return that set up a New England score. Yeah, there was another 15 or 20-yard punt return. I didn't think the kickoff coverage was that great either. But I was also trying to figure out, as things flashed by on the TV, I was trying to figure out who was on the field. And I think part of it, as you said, is you've got a lot of guys on those coverage teams who are out there trying to show whether or not they belong on an NFL roster. You got a lot of guys out there covering those kicks who aren't going to be on this team. Yeah, I think there on one of the long punt returns, I think it was wide receiver Marcus Kemp who was in the gunner role and basically got pushed out of bounds and left a huge lane, for the returner to go up the field. And no offense to Marcus Kemp and his mom, if she's listening to the show, but Marcus Kemp is not making this football team. So I'm not going to freak out about that. But yeah, I let it settle in. Obviously the coverage has to be better than it was. But let's see who's on this team and let's see what it looks like the first couple of weeks of the regular season.
Yeah, I'm inclined to think that way as well, but I did not like the coverage. And I think that's probably something that the coaches are going to point out this week in the coming week of practice. All right. Speaking of this week and the coming week, Ed, what are you going to be looking for in the practices and in the second preseason game as far as, improvement or things that are going to maybe be done differently?
Well, I think, as I said, with talking about Beavers and Tay Crowder and the linebacker alignment, I think one of the things that I'm going to be looking for is whether some of the personnel groupings begin to change. Does Beavers get some snaps in place of Tay Crowder? Does Quincy Roche maybe start to get some snaps, with the first team? I mean, Roche has been well behind O'Shane Ximenez at this point. I think that you're getting closer and closer to having to pin down that 53. So I'm going to be watching. We talked about the secondary. were they impressed enough by any of those guys in the secondary that, does a guy like Darren Evans start to get more of a look with maybe the second team guys? I think he's been mostly with the third team guys. So I think that's a big part of it. They're not going to show us anything different in terms of offensive and defensive scheme in training camp. But I think that's the big thing that I'm going to be eyeballing is some of those personnel groups, not to mention, do we start to see some of these injured guys come back off NFI, come back off the PUP list? Do we see Kadarius Toney get back on the field? Do we see Azeez Ojulari, who hasn't practiced yet, get back on the field? Do we see Sterling Shepard get back on the field? Because we are getting to a point where if they don't get back on the field soon, Patty, you have to start questioning their readiness for week one when the season starts.
Right. Because, you could make the case that we're about halfway through the summer now. So time's starting to run out. Right.
And there's not a lot of full, hard training camp style practices remaining. There's maybe another week's worth of those. Maybe the scrimmage against the Jets coming up on the 25th. But after that, you're largely in regular season mode when it comes to practice. So you're at that point where really, if you can be comfortable that some of these guys are going to be ready for week one, you kind of cross your fingers and hope that you start to see some of these guys get back to practice.
Yeah, that's going to be important, especially for some of these guys that have missed large chunk. Rodarius Williams has been sidelined several practices. Got to get some of these guys back. And also it's hurting their chances to stick around on the roster. So
absolutely.
A lot of work still to be had. It is the final. Sunday's going to be the final training camp practice. We're recording this on a Friday, by the way, folks. You'll probably see this on Sunday/Monday. Fans will have had the opportunity to see the practices, which was great. And a lot of work still to be done for the New York Giants. Edward, I know you'll be there. I'll be there. We've got two preseason games coming up in a row. Cincinnati, a home game for the Giants, and then the Jet game, which is technically a road game for the Giants. That's coming up. And then before you know it, my friend, it'll be time to guess the 53-man roster and then get into week one.
and do you know how wrong we're all going to be about this 53-man roster, Patty?
Well, speak for yourself. I've done okay with that. I haven't been 100%, but
I have too. But the reality of it is, when you get the new coaching staff, you get the new GM.
True.
You get the first year with those guys. We're all going to predict our 53-man rosters. And then we're going to look at the guys that they keep and go, what? What did they just do?
That's true. We do have to learn how they think about this stuff. That is true. That is going to make it tough. But hey, that's what fun would it be if we had all the answers?
That's true. So, even though people think we have all the answers.
No, hardly. All right, my friend, as always, a pleasure having you on. Giant fans, thank you so much for tuning in to the LockedOn Giants podcast. Make sure you keep it here all week long. We'll have updates from camp. We'll have the Bengals preseason wrap up. I'll do an instant hit. And make sure you check out my work over on Giants Country, the written work of myself, Coach Gene, and all the guys over there. And don't forget, if you get tired of us, check out Eddie's stuff over at Big Blue View. It's okay. He's a good egg, I think.
I try.
He tries. All right, Giant fans, thank you so much for tuning in and making us your first listener of the day, or if watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. We'll be back at you tomorrow.